Right now, America has roughly 22.7 million millionaires, and only about 7.4 million of them actually have $1 million they can spend. Let that sink in. 2/3 of the people who technically qualify for the most glamorous label in personal finance could not write you a check for $1 million without selling the roof over their head or taking on debt. That gap between the millionaire you are on paper and the millionaire you are in your brokerage account is the reason most millionaires cannot retire, and the reason a minority of them can. Here is how the trick works. When UBS published its Global Wealth Report, it counted about 22.7 million American millionaires, nearly 9% of the adult population. And that number is growing fast. Almost 400,000 Americans became brand new millionaires in 2024 alone, which works out to more than 1,000 new ones every single day. Sounds like a golden age of wealth. But look at how that number is built. Net worth means everything you own minus everything you owe. Your house, your cars, your retirement accounts, your savings, the equity in your business, pile it all up, subtract the mortgage and the loans, and if the result clears $1 million, congratulations, you made the list. Now here's where it gets interesting. When Capgemini counts wealthy individuals for its World Wealth Report, it uses a stricter ruler, investable assets only. That means the primary residence is out, the cars are out, the furniture, the watch collection, all of it out. What is left is the money that actually works for you. Stocks, bonds, cash, funds. Things that can be sold on a Tuesday afternoon and turned into groceries by Friday. And under that definition, the United States does not have 22.7 million millionaires. It has about 7.4 million. Roughly 15 million Americans vanish from the count the moment you ask the only question that matters in retirement. Can you spend it? Think about how absurd that is. We have built an entire cultural fantasy around the word millionaire, the game shows, the books, the endless net worth milestone videos, including mine. And the word turns out to be almost useless as a measure of freedom. 2 out of 3 paper millionaires are holding wealth that is locked in drywall. And drywall does not pay for groceries, does not cover health insurance, and does not fund a single year of retirement unless you are willing to sell the place you live or borrow against it and pay interest for the privilege of touching your own money. I have spent more than 10 years running my own business, sitting across from accountants and fiscal lawyers who watch how money actually moves for a living. You know what never comes up in those meetings? The total. Nobody who understands money asks what your pile is worth. They ask what your pile pays you, what shows up every month without you lifting a finger, and what it would cost you in taxes and disruption to turn the rest into spendable cash. Those are 2 very different conversations, and only one of them decides whether you can stop working. So here's the map for the rest of this video. There are really 3 types of millionaires, and only some of them can actually quit. There is the trapped millionaire, rich on paper, broken cash flow, and far more common than anyone wants to admit. There is the Coast Millionaire who has the liquid money, could leave tomorrow, and keeps clocking in anyway, for reasons that live entirely between their ears. And there is the free millionaire whose money is positioned to be spent, not admired. As I walk through each one, your job is to figure out which type you are right now, or which type you are on track to become, because the answer changes every decision you make from here on. So let's meet the most common kind, the one the label flatters most. Meet the trapped millionaire. Picture a couple in their mid-60s. They bought their house decades ago, raised kids in it, paid the mortgage off year by year, and the market did the rest. The home is now worth $1 million. They also have $100,000 sitting in investment accounts, the result of steady contributions that never quite became the priority the house was. Add it up, and you get $1.1 million in net worth. By every definition the culture uses, these people are millionaires. They could tell their coworkers, they could put it in a Christmas letter, and nobody would argue. Now run the retirement math, because that is where the label falls apart. Their combined Social Security pays about $40,000 a year, which, to be clear, is a decent foundation, more than many get. But the life they actually live costs around $90,000 a year. The house is paid off, yes, but property taxes, insurance, maintenance, groceries, cars, travel to see the grandkids, healthcare premiums before Medicare kicks in, it adds up to $90,000 whether they like the number or not. That leaves a gap of $50,000 a year that has to come from somewhere. And the somewhere is a portfolio of $100,000. At that burn rate, the portfolio is empty in about 2 years. 2 years. Against a retirement that, if they are healthy, lasts 25 to 30. The other 23 years are funded by hope and a house they cannot eat. You might think this couple is an edge case, an unfortunate outlier. The data says they are the mainstream. The median home equity for homeowners age 65 and older is $250,000, according to the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, and that figure's up 47% since 2019. Americans aged 62 and older are sitting on a record $14.39 trillion in home equity as of mid-2025. $14 trillion. It sounds like a mountain of retirement security until you learn where it sits relative to everything else. The National Institute on Retirement Security found that for retirees at the 75th income percentile, not the poor, not the struggling, the upper middle home equity makes up roughly 84% of total net worth. 84% of everything they have is the building they sleep in. And when you zoom out to the whole retired population, median retirement savings is $40,000. $40,000. The median home equity at the same moment is $130,000. The typical American retiree has more than 3 times as much wealth in their walls as in their accounts, and the concentration is not evenly shared. The Urban Institute broke it down by demographic group, and the split is stark. For Black homeowners aged 62 and older, home equity represents 81% of total net worth. For Latino homeowners in the same age group, it is 89%. Nearly everything they own is the house. For white homeowners, it is 47%, which is still enormous, but leaves far more in spendable form. Same country, same label, completely different degrees of freedom. None of these numbers come from vibes. They come from housing studies, retirement security reports, and demographic breakdowns that almost nobody reads cover to cover, which happens to be the entire job around here. If you are the type who would rather hear the actual figures than a motivational speech about believing in yourself, subscribe, because every video on this channel starts in a document most people will never open. So the Trapped Millionaire is not rare, not unlucky, not a cautionary tale from the margins. It is the dominant American millionaire profile, the default outcome of decades of doing exactly what everyone was told to do. Which raises the obvious question you have probably been asking for the last 2 minutes. Fine, the wealth is in the house, why don't they sell the house? On paper, it sounds so clean. Sell the $1 million house, buy a smaller place for $400,000, pocket the difference, retire on the proceeds. Financial advisors sketch this on a whiteboard like it is a transaction. It is not a transaction. It is a life demolition with a check attached. Start with what the move actually costs. There are realtor commissions and closing costs that shave tens of thousands off the top before you see a dime. Depending on your state and how the numbers land, there can be tax consequences waiting on the other side. There are moving costs, and then there is the part no spreadsheet captures. You are leaving the community you spent 3 decades inside. The neighbors who watched your kids grow up, the doctors who know your history, the church, the club, the Friday routine. Researchers who study retirement have a way of describing what the house actually is. It is not an asset that happens to be lived in. It is the load-bearing wall of a social life. Selling it is not a withdrawal. It is a relocation of your entire existence, undertaken at the exact age when building a new network is hardest. And here's the data point that should end the debate about who this trap really belongs to. Vanguard looked at home equity relative to income across baby boomers, and the pattern is upside down from what you would expect. Lower income boomers have 3.8 times their annual income locked up in their homes. For top earners, it is 1.1 times. Read that again? The people who most desperately need their wealth in spendable form have nearly 4 years of income sealed inside a building, while the people who least need it have their money where they can reach it. The trap does not distribute itself randomly. It lands hardest on exactly the households least equipped to absorb a bad outcome, because selling and downsizing is the most disruptive for the people with the fewest alternatives. Now, if the house were actually functioning as a retirement engine, you could argue all of this is a reasonable trade. So let's check the receipts. According to the National Institute on Retirement Security, property and investments together deliver about 6% of retirees' income. 6%. The asset Americans were told for 40 years was their nest egg. The thing they sacrificed liquid savings to build shows up in the actual income data as a rounding error. Social Security, pensions, and continued work do the heavy lifting. The house mostly sits there, appreciating quietly, paying nothing, while its owner is told to feel wealthy. And this is the part where I get mildly annoyed, because none of it was an accident. The entire personal finance industry spent decades teaching one playbook: buy the biggest house the bank approves, pay off the mortgage, watch the net worth number climb, feel rich. Every guru, every bank ad, every well-meaning parent repeated it. It optimized millions of people for a screenshot, a beautiful net worth figure you could admire at 65. And almost nobody in the chain ever asked the follow-up question: can this money be spent without dismantling your life? The Millionaire label flatters the balance sheet and strands the checking account. You did everything right by the rules you were handed, and the rules were the problem. The system built the trap, then congratulated you for walking into it. So that is type 1. Asset rich, cash poor, and locked in by the very advice that was supposed to set them free. But here is where it gets stranger. There is a second type of millionaire who avoided all of this liquid portfolio, real income, the math fully solved, and they still cannot stop working. Their trap has nothing to do with drywall. It lives entirely between their ears. Meet the Coast Millionaire. On paper, this is the person the Trapped Millionaire wishes they were. The portfolio is liquid 7 figures in genuine investable assets. Money that could become cash inside a week without touching the roof over their head. Social Security is coming, maybe a pension on top, and the mortgage is gone or close to it. Run their numbers through any retirement calculator and the screen lights up green. Every model delivers the same verdict: you can stop. Honestly, you could have stopped 3 years ago. And yet, every Monday morning, they clock in. This is not a rare species. T. Rowe Price ran its retirement saving and spending study in 2022 and found that about 20% of retirees are still working, either full-time or part-time. You could blame that on financial necessity. Some of them do need the money. But the same study found that 57% of retirees say they want to keep working in some form, more than half. And the AARP's 2025 survey of adults over 50 sharpens the picture. 7% had returned to work in the prior 6 months, and only 48% of them pointed to money supplemental income, inflation worries, which means the majority went back for something else, something a paycheck quietly covers up. Here's what I've learned watching this up close, and I'll be honest about my seat at the table. I have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested. So this is not theory for me. It's my own wiring I'm describing. The traits that build $1 million are frugality, discipline, and a hair-trigger aversion to loss. You don't accumulate serious money by being relaxed about money. You accumulate it by saying no 1,000 times, no to the car, no to the renovation, no to the dinner for 30 consecutive years. And then retirement arrives and demands the opposite motion. Spend the pile down on purpose every month and watch the number shrink. Your brain reads that as bleeding. Every withdrawal feels like the account is dying, even when the math says it's doing exactly what it was built for. This is the core of everything on this channel. Most financial mistakes aren't math problems, they're brain problems. The Coast Millionaire solved the math a decade ago. What they can't solve is the identity underneath it. Who are you when nobody needs you on Monday? What are you for when the number you've tracked your entire adult life stops going up? Work becomes the one place those questions can't reach you, so you stay. Not for the salary, for the shelter. 1 more year is the most expensive phrase in retirement planning because it's never 1 year. It's a loop. The number that felt like freedom at 55 stops feeling like freedom at 60 because the goalpost moves every time you get close. That's not caution. That's fear wearing a spreadsheet costume. If this is landing a little close to home, that's the channel working as intended. Subscribe if you want the uncomfortable version of personal finance instead of the motivational poster version, because the next stretch doesn't get more comfortable. Because here's the thing about the Coast Millionaire. The fear doesn't stay theoretical forever. Eventually, some of them do it. They hand in the badge, pull the ripcord, walk out into the retirement they spent decades earning. And what the data says happens next, what actually happens to people who retire before their head is ready, even when their money is where this gets genuinely uncomfortable. So let's look at the receipts. The health and retirement study is the gold standard academic data set here. It's the one researchers actually trust, tracking real households over decades, not internet anecdotes. And what it shows is this. About 1 in 4 retirees, 24% goes back to work within 5 years of retiring. Now, that's all retirees, including people pushed out early by layoffs and health problems. So you'd expect some of that. But here's the number that should bother the Coast Millionaire specifically. For people who retire at 51 or 52, the early exits, the ripcord pullers, the ones who beat the system, the return rate jumps to 36%, more than 1 in 3. And the average unretirement spell lasts about 4 years, which tells you these aren't consulting gigs or boredom hobbies. 4 years is a real job. That's not dipping a toe back in. That's re-enlisting. While we're here, let me do the thing I do, because you've probably seen a scarier version of this statistic floating around. There's a viral claim that 81% of early retirees go back to work within 4 years. It gets repeated constantly in the FIRE community as if it's settled science. It isn't. That figure comes from a self-published tracking project. One guy following 380 self-selected early retirees who volunteered to be counted. Self-selected samples tell you about the people who raise their hands, not about the population. The peer-reviewed number is the one I gave you. Roughly 1 in 4 overall. More than 1 in 3 for the youngest retirees. And honestly, that's damning enough. You don't need to inflate the data when the real data already says a third of the people who escape come back. Here's the part that never makes it into a retirement calculator. The calculator tells you whether the money survives. It says nothing about whether you survive, whether the person who's been saving for 30 years can actually become a person who spends on purpose without flinching. I got tired of hunting for that research scattered across academic papers and industry reports, so I built it into a digital book called The Exit Code. It distills 50 years of actual retirement data into a mathematical framework, including the research on unretirement and why people go back, the 58% rule and the buffer you need against being forced out before you're ready, and the framework that turns maybe someday into a specific date on a calendar. It costs less than 1 hour with a mediocre financial advisor, and it's through the link in the description. Every year, you spend guessing compounds against you. Which brings us back to the question that actually matters. Some people retire and stay retired, no boomerang. No 4-year relapse, no anesthesia paycheck. So what does the third type, the one who actually gets free, do differently? Meet the free millionaire. And here's the first surprise. They might not even clear the $1 million bar by the definition that makes headlines. Because what makes them free is not the size of the pile, it's the plumbing. The free millionaire's retirement is funded the way a utility is funded, by flow, not by stock. Social Security arrives every month like clockwork. Maybe there's a pension on top. Maybe rental income from a duplex bought back in their 40s when everyone else was upgrading the kitchen. And underneath it all sits a portfolio that was built from day one to be drawn down accounts designed to be emptied on a schedule, not admired from a distance. When this household needs to fund the year, here's what that takes. A scheduled withdrawal. An automatic transfer they set up years ago. That's it. Not a house sale, not a new loan. Not a negotiation with their own emotions about dismantling their life. Funding December looks exactly like funding March. The money arrives the way a paycheck used to, except nobody has to show up anywhere to earn it. Now put 2 households side by side, because this is where the contrast earns its keep. You already know the first one, the couple from earlier, the $1 million house, the $50,000 annual gap, the accounts that run dry in 2 years. Keep them in mind. Now meet household 2, a couple worth maybe $700,000 on paper. $300,000 less than the first pair by the scoreboard the culture watches they're losing. But look at the plumbing. Their Social Security covers the base layer of the life they actually want. A small pension, or the rent from that duplex, covers the middle. And their $400,000 portfolio only has to top off about $20,000 a year. At a sustainable withdrawal rate, that portfolio doesn't empty in 2 years. It very likely outlasts them, and probably leaves something behind. Same country, same retirement age. One household goes to sleep every night knowing the math works. The other avoids running the math at all. And the difference between them was never discipline, never income, never luck. It was where the dollars were parked and what they were expected to do. If you take one idea from this video, take that one, because it rewires every savings decision you make from here on. Before you romanticize the free millionaire though, understand something important. Freedom doesn't mean invulnerability. Every retirement that works is funded by something, and whatever funds it is, also its risk. Call it the vulnerability symmetry. If your retirement runs on recurring checks, Social Security, a pension, then you depend on checks you don't control. Benefit formulas can change, pension funds can freeze or get restructured, and your only lever is your own spending. If your retirement runs on a portfolio, you depend on markets and on your own withdrawal discipline, retire straight into a brutal first few years of returns, and the math bends in ways no amount of frugality fully repairs. And if you're the balance type, funded by a mix of income and investments, you carry a small dose of both risks. Diversified, yes. Immune, no. The free millionaire knows this. It's actually part of what makes them free. They never eliminated risk. They looked their specific version of it in the eye, sized it, and built a buffer against the one most likely to hit them. Even a retirement that works needs a real plan, and I'll figure it out when I get there is not a plan. That's the Coast Millionaire's lullaby. But the deepest difference is the one almost nobody talks about, and it happened long before any account was opened. Years before the withdrawal schedule existed, the free millionaire made a decision that had nothing to do with money. They decided what the money was for, a specific life, with a specific cost, starting at a specific date, the Tuesday afternoons they actually wanted to live. That is a psychological decision, and it was made a decade before the financial one. The Trapped Millionaire optimized for a number. The Coast Millionaire optimized for a feeling of safety that never arrives. The free millionaire optimized for a life, then built the plumbing to deliver it. You'd think that settles it. Money positioned, plan in place, purpose decided. Surely these people glide into retirement and enjoy every dollar they spent 30 years earning. And here is the statistic that explains why even the free ones struggle to do that. Larry Fink, the chairman of BlackRock, a man who oversees more retirement money than almost anyone alive, has cited a statistic that should be printed on the cover of every retirement brochure in America. 2 decades after retirement, nearly 80% of retirees still hold almost 80% of their savings. 20 years in, the nest egg barely touched. Here's the behavioral split underneath it. Retirees happily spend predictable income, Social Security checks, pension payments, money that arrives on a schedule and feels like a paycheck. But ask them to withdraw from the pile they spent 30 or 40 years building, and they recoil, physically. The same person who will blow a tax refund without a second thought cannot bring themselves to sell 4% of a portfolio that exists for exactly that purpose. The accumulation machine never got an off switch. So name the paradox, because it's the final piece. The people most likely to accumulate $1 million are the least likely to ever feel comfortable spending it. Frugality, discipline, loss aversion, the exact traits that built the wealth become the cage that holds it. The mindset is the fortune, and the mindset is the prison. You don't retire from your own wiring, and if you think this is a problem of the merely comfortable, zoom out. At the end of the third quarter of 2024, the top 20% of American households owned 71% of the country's total wealth, an average net worth of $3.8 million. The bottom half of the country held around 52,000. That gap is obscene, and it deserves its own video. But here's the part that belongs in this one. Even inside that top group, even among people sitting on millions, the trapped outnumber the free. More money, same cage. The wiring doesn't care about the balance. This is why I've never been impressed by lottery ticket strategies or the guy at the barbecue explaining his latest coin. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes, and more importantly, it built fortunes people could actually reach, in accounts designed to be spent, funding lives someone bothered to design in advance. So the question was never whether you crossed $1 million. It's whether the money you can actually use covers the life you actually want. Next, I'll show you how to calculate your real number, the one that matters, CE. So the question was never whether you crossed $1 million. It's whether the money you can actually use covers the life you actually want. Next, I'll show you how to calculate your real number, the one that matters.